Hey viewers, welcome back to the channel. In the high-stakes game of global trade wars, oil isn't just a commodity, it's a weapon. And right now, China has made a bold move, slashing US crude oil imports by staggering 90% and turning north toward Canada. That is right. Thanks to a major pipeline expansion in western Canada, Chinese imports of Canadian crude have skyrocketed to record-breaking levels, over 7.3 million barrels in March alone. But here is where it gets even more dramatic. While American oil producers are shutting down drills and the US faces economic ripples, China and Canada are suddenly cozying up, talking trade deals and forming what some are calling a new energy alliances. Critics say this is the fallout of Trump's aggressive tariff war. Others argue it's just global economics at play. So who is really winning here? Is China outmaneuvering the US? Has Canada switched sides? And what does this mean for American strategic oil future? Stick around, we are breaking it all down, from the numbers of the national consequences and sharing some very public opinions you don't want to miss. Let's dive in.
In a trade war, more than oil, you need an ally. I have no idea why Canada looks more like an ally to China than to the United States. Truly don't understand.
This is big news. The Globe and Mail is reporting that China and Canada are in talks to create a China-Canada free trade agreement. And they gave a quote from the Chinese embassy in Ottawa, and it says, "China is willing to work with Canada to create a good environment for China-Canada economic and trade cooperation based on the principles of correct understanding, mutual respect, seeking common ground while reserving differences, and mutual benefit and win-win results." This is in line with the fundamental interest of the two countries and their peoples. China has always advocated trade liberalization and facilitation and actively participated in Asia-Pacific, regional cooperation, and economic integration. So while conservative politicians in Canada are trying to make nice with Donald Trump and begging him not to put tariffs on Canada, liberals like Melanie Joly are in current talks with China to get a good deal for Canada. China is currently the second biggest economy in the world, and they also have the largest military in the world.
Canada is a real communist country over here. Everything is owned by big corporation, which they lobby the government with their money. Unlike in China, there is less innovation, and we pay more taxes over here in Canada.
Okay, this is absolutely crazy. China just cut their US oil purchases by 90%. And just to kind of make it a bit more funny, they right now are importing a record amount from Canada. So cut the US by 90% because of all these tariffs, of course, and increased Canadian oil to some crazy new record. I wonder who's winning really in this battle. Is it China? Is it the US? Let me know down below.
China has slashed US oil imports by 90% and is now buying record amounts of Canadian crude as trade tensions heat up. In March alone, China imported 7.3 million barrels of Canadian oil, thanks to the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion, while US oil exports dropped from 29 million barrels a month to just 3 million. Amid Trump's 145% tariffs on Chinese goods and China's 125% retaliation, Canada's oil exports to China hit $1.75 billion last year, creating a new energy alliance that's reshaping global oil markets.
This is a great news, man. And Canada should have done it a long time ago. And this is a good move. As you can see, China decided to buy Canadian oil now. And this is going to take Canada really, really far. And I think Canadians should start more trade deal with China, because Canada needs China more than US at this time. I think Canada should start to going outside of US and having more trade relationship with other countries. And again, this is very, very good news.
China continues to strike back at the United States. They have reduced their imports of U.S. oil by 90% and instead have turned to Canada to get their supply. The Financial Post reports a pipeline expansion in Western Canada that opened less than a year ago has presented China and other East Asian oil importers with expanded access to the vast crude reserves in Alberta's oil sands region. Chinese crude imports from the port near Vancouver soared to an unprecedented 7.3 million barrels in March and are on pace to exceed that figure this month, according to data which tracks waterborne oil and natural gas shipments. Meanwhile, Chinese imports of U.S. oil have collapsed to just 3 million barrels a month from a peak of 29 million in June. This chart really tells the story. You could see the U.S. oil imports to China absolutely collapse as you see Canadian imports skyrocket. Just the latest of many moves China has made as payback for Donald Trump's escalating trade war. We'll be covering all of it right here on the Midas Touch Network, so make sure you're following our account and add the Midas Touch podcast right now on Apple and Spotify.
There's 2 million Chinese living here in Canada peacefully. Nobody speaks about these people ever, ever. I didn't see any Chinese person on the news ever. So pretty much everyone in this country has a problem with one group of people only. And one group only, which is really weird, by the way. And the problem is that that one group of people is ruining things for every immigrant in this country, which is so unfair. That's why, it's mandatory for everyone to speak up. And this is the problem, guys. It's not a democracy anymore in Canada. If you speak, you get labeled as racist, whatever, or weird, that people are afraid to lose their jobs, just to speak, just to talk. The opinion, right now you have to be so politically correct, extremely sensitive whatever you share, which is freaking weird, by the way. Pick up the phone, make a fucking video, speak your truth, man. Just say whatever you want. Because there's the thing, guys, if you don't speak about these things, and these things exist, these are hidden problems in society, by the way. These things exist in society, guys. It's not something new. People are thinking about these things. It's just many people are afraid to speak. That's why it's extremely important to talk about these things and just chat in the comments, man. Let me know what you think. Let's fucking debate what's going on.
Donald Trump's bad week just got worse as China announced it's ready to discuss trade negotiations with Canada. Yes, Donald Trump has pushed China and Canada together. Now, this comes to us from CTV News. Take a look at the headline. China says it wants to partner with Canada to push back against American bullying. Yeah, Donald Trump has managed to push our closest friend and ally into the arms of China, our biggest competitor. Now, it should be noted that during this trade war, China and Canada initially went after each other. Canada put tariffs up on China, and China put tariffs on Canada. Almost as if Canada was trying to tell the United States, hey, we're still your friends, but now it seems there's an opportunity. We are going to lose them to China. Donald Trump said he was the great unifier, and who knew that he didn't mean us and our allies. He meant our allies and our competitors. This is not the art of the deal. This is the fart of the deal. Donald Trump got into a situation he was not prepared for, and he is causing long-term pain that is going to take a long time to get out of.
China is going to be the superpower probably this year. This year, mark my words. America has isolated themselves into themselves, and they thought that, that everybody's going to follow them. Trump has tried to turn around and tell UK, you can't be dealing with China. It's not going to work, bro. China is going to be the superpower. Matter of fact, China has begun importing record amounts of Canadian oil while slashing purchases of U.S. oil by roughly 90% amid a growing trade war. A pipeline expansion in Western Canada has presented China and other East Asian oil importers with expanded access to the vast crude oil reserves in Alberta oil sands region. The deal resumes China's oil imports while allowing the country to avoid making a new oil deal with the U.S. So much for winning, right, Trump? So much for winning. This is not winning. This is losing. This is losing. I don't care if you spin it, however you try to spin it. This is losing. This is completely losing. As you know, that we import so much oil from Canada. So much. And now Canada is now reached a deal that's cutting 90% of our oil from Canada, that we're not getting that oil anymore. What are we going to do? You see what I'm saying? You cannot isolate. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the reserves. We don't have those things. And contrary to what other people are saying on the internet, We don't have it. We have 350 million people here and we all drive cars. We need gas. Okay? Whew, China ain't playing.
China just cut 90% of its crude oil purchase from the U.S. starting today, where they used to buy 29 million barrels a month. Now they're purchasing 3 barrels per month. Because of Trump's tariff war with China, China is now purchasing 600% more crude oil from Canada than it ever did in its whole history. Now that we have that Trans Mountain pipeline going from Alberta down to BC, we are seeing more crude oil being purchased from China and increasing all of this workload for our Canadian border. And this led to Toronto prices for gas down to $1.16 per liter. And I haven't seen prices like that since the height of COVID, probably fall of 2020. What do you guys think about this tariff war? Is this a good thing for the U.S. that China's buying less oil, which means more oil for the U.S. citizens? Or is this a good thing for Canada? Like all this purchase coming from China of the crude oil that we have, from less than 1 million barrels per month to up to 8 million barrels per month China is purchasing from Canada. Now, the crude oil that China purchases from North America is a speck compared to what it purchases from Russia, from North Korea. But all of this oil sand reserves we have in Alberta, China is now purchasing more from Canada, less from the U.S. It just means more money coming into our Canadian country, which works well for us in the short term. Just wondering how long this will actually last. Tell me what you guys think. Is Trump winning this tariff war? You tell me.
So China says they're buying their oil from Canada. Yeah, they said they're going to drop 90% of purchases of American crude oil and buy it from Canada instead in record amounts. The crude oil industry is already shutting down drills or pumps because they're tired of what Trump and his tariffs are doing. And now they're not going to be able to sell to China either. I'm thinking like 1970s, the gas shortages. We're not pumping, we're not selling. It's all going to disappear really quick. Not to mention we still don't know where they're keeping our strategic oil reserve anymore because they privatized that also. And nobody's ever found the location. They found supposedly who's owning it, and it's not the storage people. But, yeah, China's going to buy their oil from Canada from now on. They'll still get 10% from us. This should be wonderful.
So the Trump tariffs should be no surprise to anyone. When Trump announced the retaliatory tariffs, and that is in retaliation to countries that have tariffs against the U.S., this is what it looks like now. These are all the countries that are actively trying to negotiate. These are the ones that have offered concessions. This is one that got heavy tariffs and had no retaliation. This one, well, it's a European Union, so it's multiple countries. But overall, there's 70 countries that want to fly into the US and make concessions. And guess what we did? The exact same thing as China. We are the only 2 countries that retaliated to the tariffs. And let me tell you why this is important. Think of America think of the concept of America like Amazon. I don't know if you guys know this, but Amazon represents nearly 40% of all e-commerce. They are basically e-commerce in the US. And the same holds true in Canada. Now, keep that thought in mind. Did you know that in order to sell on Amazon, they will take a percentage, and roughly that percentage ends up being about 20% of the total sale? They take a huge chunk. In certain occasions, when it's bigger items, heavier items, that percentage goes up. Then they charge you marketing fees on top of it. Then there's advertising on top. It ends up being nearly a quarter. The reason I'm telling you this is they know they have a strong marketplace. They know their marketplace will generate sales because they effectively created the concept of e-commerce. They are, in my opinion, the definition of e-commerce because that's where the majority of transactions happen. The same holds true for America. The US is the largest market in the world. It has among the wealthiest people in the world. Everyone has been selling products at a discount and basically dumping products to America. And I'm not defending tariffs, and I'm just explaining to you at least the logic on the side of Donald Trump. I hate the tariffs. Obviously, it's bad for Canada, it's bad for many countries, but that's how America is approaching tariffs. And ultimately, what they want is they want to make deals with these countries where they are buying American products. Now, America can access their marketplaces, they get more favorable terms, they make investments, like complete investments into the US. That's ultimately what America wants. And while obviously the stock market is absolutely atrocious, I'm getting absolutely destroyed and hammered over it. And again, I hate the tariffs, and I think there should be free trade. I have a feeling that in the next 2 years, America is going to see this record number of employment growth. That's just that's my opinion. That's what I have a feeling is going to happen. And they, I think, already said there was over, I think, almost 250,000 new jobs in America. That's in 1 month. Once some of these concessions, these investments, these new factories that are being moved and things that are being transferred over into the US as a result of the tariffs, there's going to be a massive boom. I really do think so. Anyways, I don't think this was a smart play.
Let's talk about what just happened in the global oil market and why it's sparking serious conversations around international alliances, American energy strategy, and the long-term impact of trade wars. So, China has officially slashed its crude oil imports from the United States by a massive 90%. That is not a typo, a 90% drop, and instead of easing up on their energy needs, they have simply redirected their purchasing power to Canada. In March alone, China imported a record-breaking 7.3 million barrels of Canadian crude oil, with projections showing that number rises again this month. Meanwhile, US oil exports to China have dropped from a peak of 29 million barrels a month all the way to just 3 million. This isn't a small dip, this is a major pivot, and it tells a much bigger story than just barrels and pipelines. At the center of all this is the expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline in Western Canada. It opened less than a year ago and gave China and other Asian nations expanded access to about oil sands. For Canada, it's a win. For China, it's a leverage. And for the United States, it's a red flag waving in the face of an already volatile trade war. Now, let's zoom out why this is happening. It all stems from escalating tariffs and retaliatory policy. Former President Donald Trump initiated massive tariffs on Chinese goods, 145% on certain items. China responded with 125% tariffs on US goods, including crude oil. That made American oil far too expensive for Chinese buyers, so they look for alternative, and Canada was ready and waiting with infrastructure, supply, and now political opportunity. So now we are seeing not just an economic shift but a diplomatic one. China isn't just buying Canadian oil. They are extending a hand to Canada for a broader trade negotiation. According to the CTV News, China wants to work with Canada to push back against what it calls America bullying. That phrase alone should make US policymakers sit up and pay attention. Here's where this becomes more than just energy policy, it becomes geopolitical chase. Historically, Canada and the United States have been close allies on trade, defense, infrastructure, and yes, energy. Canada has long term been one of the largest suppliers of oil to the US and a key strategic partner. But now, Canada seems to be exploring new alignments, not because they are turning their back on America, but because the economic opportunity is simply too large to ignore. And let's be real, after years of trade friction and tariff crossfire, many countries, including traditional islands, are starting to divert their partnership. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. China found an alternative supply and Canada found a new customer. This is not just about market flexibility, this is about political reposition, the kind of repositioning that reshapes global alliances. Now let's talk about consequences. For the US, this is a painful blow to its already struggling oil industry. With tariff driving up the price of export and demand from China drying up, many American producers are scaling back, rigs are being shut down, workers are being laid off, and remember, the US Strategic Petroleum Reserve, once a critical buffer, is now partially privatized, and its current status is murky at best. That leaves the US vulnerable on multi-front. There is also the broader economic impact. Losing a major buyer like China not only disrupts the oil market but sends ripple effect through manufacturing, shipping, and even foreign policy. It weakens the American position in global energy discussion and strengthening others who are ready to step in like Canada, Russia or even Iran. Let's go back to the chart. Everyone talking about US oil export to China falling off a cliff. Canadian oil imports to China surging. It's like watching a seesaw in motion, except one side is dropping hard and the other side is rising fast. That visual isn't just about numbers, it's a symbol of real world leverage of who is gaining on the ground and who is losing it. And here's the ironing. Back in the early days of the trade war, Canada actually tried to align itself with the US against China. They imposed tariffs, they took diplomatic hit, they even suffered from China trade backlash. But over time, when it became clear that the US was pursuing a go-it-alone strategy with little regard for partner fallout, Canada has to rethink its position. Now, China and Canada are finding common ground, not out of ideology but out of mutual benefit. And if you are wondering whether this is just a temporal bomb or lasting shift, well, oil infrastructure doesn't lie. You don't build pipelines and shipping terminals for long-term deals. This is long-term planning. This is reshaping global supply routine. Now, here's a question that people keep asking: who is really winning this trade war? Let's take a hard look. The US has lost top buyer for its oil. Domestic producers are hurting. Strategic reservoirs are opaque, and geopolitical influence is being tested. They have successfully restructured their energy imports, maintained supply, and sent a strong message of independence. They are also showing division between the US and its allies without firing a single shot or sensation. And Canada, they have gained a powerful new trade partner, increased export, and turned a pipeline project into a geopolitical asset for them. This is a diplomatic wait for. So if we are keeping score not in ideology but in economic outcomes, China and Canada applied to be coming out ahead at test for now. The US meanwhile is largely calibrating its approach not just to trade but to how it works with allies in a shifting global landscape. Let's wrap it up with this. Energy is never just about fuel, it's about power, influence, relationship, and in a world where alliances can shift with the turn of a tariff, this story is a reminder that diplomacy matters just as much as dollars. China didn't just cut American oil imports, they rebalanced the equation and they found a willing partner in a country that was once one of America's closest allies. And that is something worth thinking about. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more global analysis, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think is really winning this trade war? Until next time, stay informed and stay sharp.